Welcome to the wonderful world of books, one of Seven Worlds and Seven World Productions, a subsidiary of Angelgram Music. My name is Gino, and I am the sole owner of Angelgram Music, as well as the executive director of Seven World Productions. Continuing our series in the book In Search of Beauty, this is Chapter 3 and 4, titled, in that order, Chapter 3 being Cornelia, Chapter 4 being Natalie. Hope you enjoy it and have a good read. Previously on the world of books In Search of Beauty, 1957, another female came into my life, one that would forever change my life and help me become the person I am today. She would instill in me an appreciation of the rich heritage of my Hungarian ancestry, culture, history, and language. She would impact my development as a human being and enrich my life with her experiences. To this day, I owe a great deal to my grandmother, my dad's mother, Cornelia. Chapter 3, Cornelia. In November of 1957, Cornelia had witnessed the total devastation of her home and country. Her son had immigrated to America in 1948. Her daughter, nicknamed Nellie, and son-in-law Thomas Sigeti had fled the country during the 1956 revolution. She had no reason to stay in Hungary. With tears in her eyes, she boarded a Lufthansa airplane with other Hungarian immigrants who were granted visas to America, immigrants who had relatives living in the States. My dad sponsored his mother's trip and was able to acquire a working visa. He hired Cornelia as his personal church secretary. In this way, Cornelia was able to come to America and be with her family. My dad's sister, Aunt Nellie, and her husband, Uncle Thomas, had come into our lives the previous fall during the 1956 uprising. I had to relinquish my private bedroom and merge into my brother's room until they could get a job and find a place to live. Uncle Thomas had a brother who had immigrated to London, Ontario, and he helped them relocate to Canada and find a job. On a cold November night, the whole family climbed into our Pontiac and took off for McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. We were to meet our grandmother in the morning, so Dad had decided to leave in the middle of the night. It was very foggy when we crossed the Pennsylvania-New Jersey line. My dad was fearless as he passed the Pennsylvania State Trooper's vehicle. The fog was so thick that the trooper did not pursue us, but kept a close distance behind, obviously utilizing our rear lights as good markers to enable driving through the muck. It was an early morning on November 18, 1957, that we met 65-year-old Cornelia, a robust little woman with large glasses and a smile that was wider than the Grand Canyon. She hugged us all and was very grateful to be in the promised land with her son and his family. We called her Nagymama, which in Hungarian means grandmother. Nagymama couldn't speak a word of English and was thrilled to hear that we spoke Hungarian and were able to converse with her. She moved into the bedroom vacated by my aunt and uncle, so from that day forward until I graduated from high school, I shared a bedroom with my two brothers. We quickly learned that Nagymama was a wealth of knowledge. She loved to tell us stories of her childhood, her young adulthood, and of course, World War II. She told us that she was born sometime between December 31st and January 1st, in 1889 and 1890. She was one of 12 children. Some of her siblings died from the Spanish flu. Some had perished in World War I, while others had been persecuted and executed in the Holocaust. She had danced to the Charleston as a young woman and had opened her very own spice store with her brother Gino. She also told us stories of the soldiers coming into her living room and ransacking all their furniture and totally disregarding any privacy. She described to us as best as she could her relationship with our grandfather, we had never met. How kind and thoughtful he was to her and his children, my dad and Aunt Nellie. Papa Gino had been a typesetter and then a publisher and had spent time in a concentration camp during World War II. She tearfully told us about how he peacefully died in her arms in the summer of 1950, about the time my mother fell in the backyard of our home in Leechburg and felt Stephen move for the first time. She became our confidant, as well as a shield for our behavior toward our parents. She always said that grandparents were meant to spoil their grandchildren, and she was not going to deviate from that policy. In short, she loved us very much, and we loved her too. Every Saturday morning she would don her apron and begin the daunting task of kneading flour and yeast into dough that would bake into 8 loaves of the best homemade bread ever eaten. The aroma of freshly baked bread would permeate throughout the parsonage every weekend, and we could hardly wait to taste warm bread with melted butter and a cup of hot cocoa. I spent many a supper going to bed with that as a meal from heaven, baked by Natalie. Saturday night you would find her working with Dad in the office, where he would finish typing the church bulletin on a blue stencil and run it through a Gestetner copy machine. Mama would take the copies and fold them up for the following morning church services. On Sunday mornings she would doll herself up for church. She attended both English and Hungarian services. Even though she could not speak English, she enjoyed listening to her son's singing voice as well as his charismatic speaking voice. In this way she was fulfilling her obligation as church secretary for my dad. She was always persistent in acknowledging her willingness to carry her own weight in the family household, a work ethic that would help mold her grandsons into productive participants of society. Weekdays you would find Mama at her desk in her little bedroom, writing a column for the American nationally syndicated Hungarian newspaper Szabadság. This paper was published in Washington, D.C. by the Hungarian Federation of America, a fraternal organization chartered by Congress. Szabadság means freedom in Hungarian, and Nagymama was one of only a handful of contributing editors for the paper. She wrote articles of social commentary in Hungarian, as well as her own poetry and her own experiences in life. Her creativity inspired me to pursue creative projects myself. She encouraged me to develop all my musical talents and abilities and was always pleading with me to play some more on the piano. She loved listening to my music. Mama also loved to watch TV. Her favorite programs were westerns. She confessed that during her childhood she had read about cowboys and Indians in America, and she wanted to come to America and see for herself. Some of her favorite characters were Annie Oakley, Buffalo Bill, Billy the Kid, Jesse James, Wild Bill Hickok, the Lone Ranger, the Cisco Kid, and her favorite shows Rawhide and Bonanza. She also loved Perry Mason and Della Street. It was interesting to watch her as she would react to the dialogue as if she understood English, but she never ever spoke a word of it. Even at the grocery store, when she would be looking over her bill of lading, she understood what she had bought and, of course, what she had paid for. My dad had also set her up with Social Security, so that about a year after she was living with us, Uncle Sam was paying her retirement benefit because of her husband's incarceration by the Germans. Nagymama quickly learned how the U.S. currency worked, and she was very able to put aside a little nest egg of her own each month. Friday nights was especially memorable to me. My parents and Nagymama would gather in my parents' bedroom where the TV had been moved to and a card table was set up. Dad would play classical and operatic records on his turntable, and we would play canasta till the wee hours of the night. Sometimes Nagymama was my partner, other times it would be one of my parents. I have fond memories of Nagymama saying, I am going to the toilet to change my luck in cards. Or hear her say, Ishtanem, Ishtanem, when dealt with an exceptional hand, which translated means, my God, my God. She was frugal, but also very generous. Our birthdays were remembered with gifts appropriate for our needs, and Christmases were very blessed with presents for all. She cried when we cried, laughed when we laughed, and shared her love for us unceasingly and unconditionally. Neudmama quickly became very close to all of the ladies in the church. She would participate in the Ladies' Aid Society's bake sales and sausage-making events to help raise funds for the church's treasury. She worked tirelessly for our family and never complained or cried about all of her misfortunes. She was grateful to be living in America, the promised land. She was a pioneer and would have gladly crossed our continent in a wagon. She instilled in all of us a sense of dignity and pride in oneself and became my idea of true beauty. Neudmama taught us two basic fundamental laws of the universe that have stood the test of time and have proven to be correct in my life so far. Rule number 1, no matter what or how you plan, things will always take you longer than you think to finish. And rule number 2, it will always cost you more than you originally budgeted. She had learned the hard way that in business it takes 5 to 7 years to establish yourself as a competitor in your field and become profitable. Till then, you have to continually make changes and modifications to suit the needs of your customers. She always said that nurturing customers was like raising children. You had to be patient and kind and anticipate needs before they would arise. She had been successful in business by faithfully and diligently adhering to these principles. I was only in the 5th grade when Neudmama shared these words of wisdom, and I am grateful that she did. She will always remain in my heart as a woman filled with beauty, charm, and elegance. Chapter 4. Natalie. Thanks to my grandmother, I was better prepared in my search for beauty even in the 4th and 5th grades. I was eager to look for those qualities she had in all of the girls I met in school. I passed 5th grade and went on to 6th with the same teacher, Mrs. Elliott. The very first day of school completely changed my life again. Unfortunately, Renee moved on with her class to Garfield Junior High a mile away, while the 4th grade class joined us as 5th graders. I would not see Renee until the next year, when I would move on to Garfield as well. I couldn't wait because you had to spend 4 years at Garfield, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade in the same school. The last 2 years of high school were scheduled to be at Johnstown High in downtown Johnstown, close to the incline plane. Natalie Krentz was sitting in the seat directly in front of me. Her family had moved to Johnstown from Washington, D.C. during the summer, so she was new to the area. Miss Elliott assigned me to help her get adjusted to our class. Natalie was tall and slender with blue eyes and short blonde hair. Her eyes sparkled when she smiled, so guess what? Yep, I forgot about Renee and said, "Hello, Natalie." I had found this fair-haired Scandinavian girl very attractive, and we became close friends. The 6th grade went by very fast as we got to know each other in our walks together to and from school. I always made sure she got home safe. In those days, boys who were liked by girls got to carry the girls' books. We didn't have backpacks. We had to carry them on our hips in all kinds of weather. The winter season was especially brutal in the hills of western Pennsylvania. But I was in love, so I did not mind walking with a snow girl like Natalie. I was also in an elite group of students who were boy patrols. We wore badges and carried fiberglass flagpoles with stop signs on them and helped the younger children at Chestnut Street School cross the streets surrounding the school at the beginning and end of the day. We had 2 guards at Broad Street and 5th, 2 guards at 5th and Chestnut, one guard at 4th and Chestnut, one guard at 6th and Chestnut, and one guard at 4th and Power Street by the bridge over Conemaugh River. As boy patrols, we were given the honor and privilege of attending a national gathering of boy patrols in Washington, D.C. during cherry blossom time in the spring of 1958. We took time off from school one Friday with teachers as chaperones for a weekend of ceremonies. We were bused into D.C. with hotel accommodations and meals paid for by the school district. We also met the President of the United States, Dwight David Eisenhower, who gave each one of us a commemorative paper thanking us for our service and duty. After the ceremony at the White House, we paraded down Pennsylvania Avenue with boy patrols from around the country back to our hotel. It was the first time for me to be away from home for an extended period without my parents. I was beginning to feel more independent as I took on more responsibilities. The same year I was a boy patrol, I studied catechism at church by my father with several other students. All Hungarian Reformed churches recognize the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testaments as the Word of God and the ultimate rule of the Christian faith and practice. In its doctrinal interpretation, it is guided by the Second Helvetic Confession and the Heidelberg Catechism, with the liberty of conscience inherent in the gospel. Both the Second Helvetic Convention and the Heidelberg Catechism are classic statements of evangelical faith written in the century of the Reformation. They have been the confessional books of the Hungarian Reformed churches ever since. The spirit of these two classic confessional books shapes their preaching and teaching ministry, Christian education and confirmation instruction, church life, and personal piety. It was customary that a person in their early youth would take study of the Bible and become officially a member of the congregation, according to the promise made by parents at the christening ceremony. I had been christened when I was 1 year old by my father's best friend, the Reverend Julius Turceni, a Lutheran pastor. But my father wanted me to be a member of the Hungarian Presbyterian Church, and so I studied the Heidelberg Catechism of the Presbyterian faith, not Lutheran. I took my vows in church with my father officiating and declaring our class as full-fledged members of the Hungarian Presbyterian Church on the Sunday following my return from Washington, and to this day I am a member of the Presbyterian Church. The 6th grade quickly went into the 7th and the 8th. At Garfield Junior High, I took choir, and I met Mr. Richard Napolitan, who taught 7th grade music appreciation, 8th grade chorus, and the 9th and 10th grade mixed choir. Because I had learned to sight sing in my father's church choir since kindergarten, and because I started private piano lessons during the 5th grade, I was able to sing in the 9th and 10th grade choir as an 8th grader. During the summer between the 8th and 9th grade, I grew about 12 inches in height, and my voice dropped over an octave. So Nappy, as the students like to call Mr. Napolitan, was excited to have me be in the bass section. He never called me by my real name, Eugene. He called me Huey. It was here that I became acquainted with choir music, and choral conducting in particular. Nappy was my mentor. Nappy had sung with Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanians in his younger years. One of his guiding principles in choral singing was the use of diphthongs, one vowel with more than one sound, like A, I, that end in E, O, that ends in U, and U, that begins with E. These sounds had to be enunciated to blend with all singers in the group. His technique was exploding consonants and enunciating the vowel sounds accordingly. Nappy gave us exercises he had learned at Waring's workshops. Interestingly, this theory of singing would come back into my life later with another chorus I would end up singing with. Nappy was also the principal percussionist for the Johnstown Symphony Orchestra. Many times you could find him practicing his timpani mallets against the side of the hallway as he monitored pupils changing classes. I admired him and wanted to sing my very best and dreamed of being a choral director. We were exposed to works by Handel and Beethoven, as well as hits from Broadway musicals. The choir's claim to fame in the city for their Christmas concert was Malot's The Lord's Prayer and Handel's Hallelujah Chorus from the Messiah. In my ninth grade, Nappy and Mr. Davis, who was the English teacher for ninth and 10th graders, collaborated in producing a musical at Garfield for the first time ever. They persuaded me to play the male lead role in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So, in the spring of 1963, I made my debut as a singing soloist and actor of the stage as Ichabod Crane. My parents were very proud of me, and my teachers were very excited about how well the show was received by a town full of steel workers and coal miners. We had 3 performances, and each one of them was sold out with standing ovations after each performance. During this time, Natalie and I were very faithful to each other and remained close, with the exception of one girl who came between us for a while. I will tell you about her in the next chapter. Renee had taken up with another boy who she liked very much. They went on to high school, and I never met Renee again. During the summer of '63, my parents informed everyone in the family that we would be moving away from Johnstown sometime in the fall. My father would be transferred to a Hungarian Evangelical and Reformed church in Fairport Harbor, Ohio, a much larger congregation in a much smaller city. When I began the 10th grade in the fall of 1963, I knew there would be some disappointed people. Nappy and Mr. Davis were upset because they had planned on producing Oklahoma and wanted me to play the role of Curly. I had to tell them that we would be moving around Halloween and that I had no say-so in the matter. My piano teacher, Mrs. Hayes, said that it was a sad day that we were leaving. I had progressed through the works of Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. I had even learned to play the saber dance. Natalie cried every day as I walked her home from school. I was in a kind of daze and did not know what to say or do. It was as if the universe around me took control of my life, and I was powerless to change it. On my last day at Garfield, my last class, together with Natalie, was in Miss Azar's science class. I had to leave in the middle of class, and as I was walking out toward the door of the class, Natalie stood up and asked Miss Azar if we could have a moment in the hallway. Miss Azar allowed it as the rest of the class giggled. In the privacy of the hallway, the two of us stood face to face. Natalie had tears streaming down her face as she said, "I won't ever see you again, will I?" I blurted, "Oh, that's not true. I'll come back to see you as soon as I can." Then I hugged her close for a long minute as she trembled and shook while sobbing. This was the first time I had broken someone's heart, and I did not like it. I was so ashamed of what was happening that I quickly separated us and promised her that everything would be all right. I turned and walked down to the opposite end of the corridor that led to the balcony of the auditorium. It was one of the most painful walks of my life. I could hear Natalie sobbing as I made my way to the end of the corridor. By the time I got to the balcony, I had tears streaming down my cheeks. The 8th grade chorus was rehearsing with Nappy on stage, and as I made my way across the aisle toward the exit doors of the auditorium and the school, I heard Nappy say, "Good luck, Huey." I waved as I descended down the steps to the door leading to the outside world. At the time, I thought that was one of the saddest days of my life, and of course, I never saw Natalie again. If you liked this episode, click like and add your comments. Better still, why don't you subscribe if you haven't already so that you may receive email notifications of future episodes. Also, check out our other worlds at Seven World Productions: the world of art, the world of faith, the world of family, the world of food, the world of games, and the world of music. Go and be inspired.